Welcome to Moody Reads. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about what my 2024 reading looked like and what my goals for 2025 look like. So we're going to start out looking at some Storygraph stats to get an idea of what my reading was like this year. I read 87 books. I think I put a 50-book goal up, like just as kind of a baseline, because I know that I'm going to hit that. I think I did the same thing last year because I didn't really want to focus necessarily on numbers. There have been years that I read over 100. Like, I was actually looking back at previous years, and in 2020 I read 171, which is just wild. Some of that, I was reading more kids' books, not like a ton though, like maybe one or two a month. I think a big part was like heavily reading for escapism, and it was kind of a problem. So anyways, 87 books is perfectly fine. The mood of the books, about half of my, I guess, pie chart for that, my books were largely emotional, reflective, and informative. This year I read a lot of short books, which is typical. I do tend to read shorter books. However, I didn't read any of the 500 plus page books, though I got close with the deep dark, I think. In terms of fiction and nonfiction, I did get about half. I'm not exactly 50% because I read an odd number of books, but as close as I could get. Which is awesome because for this 2024 and 2023, both of those, I know for sure I wanted to read more nonfiction books because I was sitting at about a third nonfiction that I typically read, so in the like 30% range. And actually my all-time numbers have since been pushed to 40%. So that's really cool. I'm definitely reading more nonfiction. In terms of format, 13 of the books I read this year were audio. For digital, I think that it says that I read 5 digitally, but 2 or 3 of them were zines that I printed out to read. So they weren't like ebooks, so I wouldn't necessarily count that, even though that's like half right. So really, I only read like 2 ebooks this year. And I think so that with all that considered, that means that I've been reading more audiobooks than average for me, and less or fewer ebooks. So far as ratings go, my average rating is 4.25, which is about par for the course. And taking a closer look at those star ratings, I have a few that I didn't rate. I don't tend to rate kids' books just because it's such a different thing to look at. I've just chosen to stop rating them. And then also the Freydis Moon book that I read, I just took my review off because that author ended up being a terrible person. So I don't recommend their books. So I just kept it in there to keep my, like, knowing what I read for myself, but they get no stars. So I went and I looked at what books I rated, you know, whatever star ratings. The conclusion that I've come to is that what are my favorites and what have gotten rated higher versus lower aren't necessarily the same thing. There's a lot of overlap there, but there are some 5-star books that did not make it to my top list, and some 3.5 rated star books that did. Furthermore, the more that I think about the 2.5 star book, the lowest rated book that I had, you know, I do probably appreciate it more than some of the 3-star books. It's just that there was a lot to critique, and because I liked some of it a lot, the other stuff really bummed me out. But the more I think about it, the more like camp it really is, you know? So could I really fault it for that? And I've been kind of going back and forth about what to do with this star rating conundrum, but I don't think that's really for this video because it'll just turn into me rambling. But I think at the end of the day, this is just a caveat that the star ratings by themselves don't really speak for the whole picture. Which I suppose is why I do the videos and the Instagram posts, because there's a lot more to say than just 1 through 5, how much did you like it? Either way, I did enjoy the majority of the books that I read this year. I think that I am pretty good at gauging how much I'm going to like a book when I pick it up. Like, I don't tend to pick up books just because a lot of people are reading them. That does contribute to what I pick sometimes. And I also, like, I tend to be kind of bad at finishing even books that I like that I pick up. So if I'm really hating a book, the chances of me finishing it are really low. Other than that, there's the question of DNFs. Most of them, the books that I technically DNF'd, or the category of book I just talked about, I was liking it or whatever, I just kind of stopped reading it, but we'll probably pick most of them back up. There is one exception, though. There is a book that I actually DNF'd. This one just came out, or is about to come out. Rosarita by Anita Desai. This is an ARC that I got through work. I'm a bookseller, so they send us lots. And if I see more ratings of people who finish it, I could very well pick it back up. It's not a long book. But I was just in the middle of so many other ones that I was a little wary about how one of the characters was kind of described. I think it was, I think when she was describing one of the Latina characters, and I kind of, I kept going because I wanted to see where it went. This isn't written by a white author, you know, and I thought that maybe it says more about the character that's describing, that's the main character whose point of view it is. So I kept going, and then, they used the G slur to describe somebody, anti-Romani slur, and it's, you know, this author's older, but it's 2024 at the time, 2025, and I know this is an ARC, maybe it got edited out, maybe things have changed, but you can't, this had to go past at least 3 people, probably more, to get to this point, and yet there is still, like, I don't know, between that and just, like, being uninterested, you know, there was no reason for me to continue reading it. I could pick it back up if the right people say the right things about it, but, like, it just ultimately wasn't worth it to me. So that is what my reading for 2024 looked like. Now I'm going to look at the 2024 goals video that I did at the beginning of the year and see what I did and didn't do. I'm not going to play the whole video on top of this one because it's just a lot, and it would also be a lot of editing that I just frankly don't want to do. So I'll, like, pause the video and summarize kind of as I go along. The first thing I talk about is the number of books that I read. So the 50 book goal, I did clearly meet the 50 book goal. I did try to not focus so much on the number and ended up reading less than last year. So there's that. I also talk about the number of nonfiction books that I read during this video, and in 2023 I read 40% nonfiction, and previously was at about 30%, and so yes, I did beat that, or I did achieve that goal and got around about 50. So that's really good. So the next goal I had was this list that I put together, I think at the beginning of 2022 that I didn't do. I had gotten a recommendation from a bunch of different people. Read none of them. Had this kind of in my head, I guess, since I didn't read him in 2023. Wait, hold on. When? Okay, so it was a list of books that I had compiled at the end of 2022, so for 2023, I think. I did not read them in 2023. I did not read them in 2024 either. Oops. I do own some of them though, and I do plan definitely to read them. And in theory, reading all of them would be really cool, especially because people recommended them, and they all sound pretty good. The only one that's super out of my wheelhouse is maybe the Kristen Hanna, although that one actually probably sounds like one of her more like if I was going to pick up a Kristen Hanna book, it would probably be that one. I mean, I guess Hamster Princess is technically outside of what I typically read, but I do dip into middle grade, so like it's fine. And it looks really fun. So these are books that I would like to read. I'm not going to say that I'm going to read all of them, although in 2025 I have been more successful inadvertently at this goal, because the first book I read this year was Icebreaker, and it was good. I liked it a lot. So who knows? Maybe I'll do this. Maybe if I say it's not a goal, I'll do it more than when I said it was a goal. The next thing was the Buzzwordathon. I did do some of the Buzzwordathon prompts. I'm not sure how many. Only a handful. It was not really a priority. But the thing with Storygraph, they have all these challenges, and I love trying to like line up some of them. And there aren't a ton that I talk about on here, just because that would be just a lot of listing stuff. And I already feel like I do that a little bit excessively with some of the monthly stuff that I do participate in a lot. And honestly, sometimes I forget to write it down, and I film on my phone. So I could pull my computer up like I have right now, but I just don't. I don't know what to tell you. But anyways, for the Buzzwordathon, I wouldn't say I totally completed the goal. I did read a couple books, which is more than nothing. And I do have, I have looked at the 2025 prompts for that too, and it would be cool to be able to do them. But it's like one of those things, I think a lot of those big yearly challenges, they end up being like cool things that I could achieve or could like line up my reading with, which would be cool. But they're not super prioritized. I think really the main readathon that I end up focusing on the most is probably the Queer Lit Readathon, but also they Read Queer All Year in 2024, and I really liked that. I think I got to read a book or more most months that fit in with their prompts. They release them at the beginning of each month, and that's been pretty cool. I did like that a lot. So that one's probably the main year-long one that I've really done in 2024, and any that I might do in 2025 I'll talk about later. The next set of goals are my DIY classes, or like reading lists. I dug into MIT's open source classes and picked a couple, kind of reworked one of them, and then made my own list for another one. I have a whole video on it. It was, there's a Black Studies class, a memory, culture, and forgetting class, and then I made the one that was on like queer language with like a global kind of perspective in there. I did not succeed in this. I did read some. I actually had the video up for the first book that I read for the queer language class, and I have another one that will come out eventually because I really liked the book. Filming just hasn't happened yet. And I did start with the other ones. It's very silly. But what happened was my printer ran out of ink. And I got irritated about it because I wanted to print off the articles and read them, which is not very environmentally sound perhaps, but it is the way that I read things clearly with my 2 ebooks that I've read per year. If it's not in front of me, it doesn't exist. It's easier for me to read them that way, and I can take notes about them. And I have a lot of articles and stuff like that printed off, especially from grad school and things like that. I have whole cases, and I have revisited them. It is useful to have them printed out, but for whatever reason, I didn't get printer ink until December. So I do want to restart that, but I do think that maybe the schedule I had lined up was a little bit too strict. I think in 2025, I am still going to be using those outlines, but a little bit more flexibly. I want to get through 1 book or designated chunk per month for each class. So often that's going to look like a book for each of them, but not always. For instance, my January goal for the Black Studies class is to finish a few articles before I get into the books for those. And then I know later in the year I've got 1 larger book for my queer global language class that I know I'm not going to try to read in a month, but I have it split up into different chunks. So I'm relaxing the goals a little bit. I'm trying to be a little bit more realistic. But I do still want to go through those things, and I do still want to write as well, because part of the things with those classes is that I wanted to get back into writing. So I would still like to write, like maybe if I could get into doing notes on everything, which I do think I've been successful at doing that much more frequently. But I want to actually write at least an essay a month. Generally speaking, ideally it would be 1 per class. But my kind of more relaxed goal is 1 completed essay a month. The rereads. I don't think I did any rereading. Oops. Yeah, the only rereading kind of that I did is that I restarted, or I picked up Let the Record Show, and I did revisit the first chapters. I did kind of a skimming and looking at the things that I highlighted before I got into the rest of the book. That's the closest thing approaching a reread that I've done. So I should definitely do that. Okay. Another goal was to finish some of the books that I started, particularly the books that I stopped in April. April of 23, my stepdad passed away, and so that was a big, I kind of like stopped reading those particular books because it was hard, and I also tend to just stop reading books. And I did get somewhere in that. I finished No Study Without Struggle was one that I started and stopped. I'm not sure how many other ones I finished. I definitely do still have some, but I'd say I kind of succeeded in that. In 2025, I would like to continue to finish books that I've started, including Let the Record Show that I just talked about. And that one I'm over halfway done with, so I think that's super doable. Okay, my next goal was to finish the vlogs that I start and actually post them, even if I'm not totally happy with them, which I think I've approximately done. I don't think I've DNF'd nearly as many video projects. I've been having trouble with like space for videos, which is why I haven't put nearly as many up as I would like. However, one of the projects that I said I wanted to revisit was my astrology reading vlog, reading through my birth chart and reading based on my birth chart. And I did do that. It's a big long 3-part reading vlog. And even though it is like massive and there's not that many people who would probably start from the beginning and watch all of it, I still did it, and I had a lot of fun, and that probably is my favorite project that I've done this year. So I'm really glad that I was able to finish that. I would really like to do more vlogs because I think that is, those are some of the most fun videos for me to do. So my next goal was about the topical TBRs and actually reading through some of the books on those. And I have worked on some of those. I think my HIV and AIDS TBR, I think I've particularly read backlist fiction around that. So I think I've been doing good with that. I haven't read as much on my cults one. I feel like the class project that I did was sort of an extension of that. And I mean, I regularly read queer books, so, you know, I started out with these lists, and I feel like I probably need to revisit my topical TBRs and nail down more of what's kind of on them and maybe make them more useful for me, because it's kind of more been a way for me to reflect on the things that I like to read about and the books that I kind of have on these different topics. There are some topics that I didn't really get to in a way that I might like to, like my cults TBR. I didn't, I think, read as much about this year. And then one thing that I said as well is that I wanted to read more of the nonfiction that's like kind of outside of my wheelhouse, with the prehistory and nature type books. And I didn't really get around to that, but it is something that I would still really like to do and is on my list of goals for 2025, is to read more like fun nonfiction for me, more or less. However, the looking at and flipping through books, allowing myself to like look and not necessarily finish if that's not what the book is for, I did do a little bit of that because I checked out this like dinosaur craft book from the library towards the beginning of the year, I think. And I did really like looking at that. I didn't make the crafts, and I kind of wanted to. I did do different craft things though. But I looked at that, and then I started looking through one dinosaur encyclopedia that was pretty cool. The pictures weren't as cool as the cover makes you think that they are. I'll probably still look through it. But I did get this one for $1. I love thrift shopping. And I have been kind of just looking at this one, and I would like to continue to do that. And to be able to just kind of like let myself look at some stuff without necessarily having to finish it. And learn more about dinosaurs, because that's just really cool. And as much as I love PBS Eons, and I actually found another channel this year that's been pretty cool, looking at like prehistory stuff. I want to get to the books too, and the animal books. I actually came up with a vlog idea that hopefully I'll do this year that involves reading books related to particular animals. So it looks like that's it for that goals video. Although the blanket that I am crocheting in that video, I think I should still actually do a video on, because I never did. I also didn't technically finish the blanket, but that's because it was getting out of hand. I think I stopped at the end of October, or in the middle of October, shortly after the shit that I did for that video. I stopped. But the thing is huge. It's already unruly. There's no need to continue. And it would be a pain to figure out where exactly I was, to be honest, because it's been a hot minute, clearly. But I should still do a video on it, because that was a fun project. I would do something like that again, but I would do it differently. But that brings me to 2025 goals. Of course, I did discuss which goals I might continue. But I do have some specifically written out. In my book journal, which this is like a part of one of the goals, I'm going to be trying to keep a book journal. In general, I'm trying to journal more, hence the vlog that I mentioned, the journaling vlog. This is not one that's in that vlog because I just got this. One of my goals is, or I guess several of my goals are about writing, but in general, I would like to keep journals, and I kind of have multiple for different topics and things like that, and to give me something different to do. Like, I need options sometimes, you know? But also this just looks fun. I did try to bullet journal before in a similar way to this, where I would write down my TBR books and then make a little bookshelf when I finish it and do a little review and a star rating and stuff like that. And it was cute and fun and stuff, but the thing with journaling is that I'm bad about like doing it for a week and then putting it down, and then I'll return to the book in 6 months and wonder what happened. So, I'm trying to do it a little bit differently, and I'll see what'll happen. And I think the little incentives that I've got going on in here are going to help me. So this one is for reading. And the very first page, I have my 2025 reading goals. And I think having access to this and revisiting this is going to help me achieve them, because that's just how things tend to work. So for my goals, I have read no more than, or have no more than 3 books that I'm actively reading at one time, physically. So this doesn't include audiobooks. I think on here I put 1 audiobook. I think I could stretch it to 2 because there's fiction and nonfiction. But no more than 3 physical books. Obviously, I have, as I've discussed, a ton of books that I'm in the middle of reading. And for this, I'm thinking like actively reading. So I'm going to pick maybe one of the books I'm in the middle of and then let myself, read like 2 other ones. That's the kind of goal. And in that, I also want to catch up on, that's kind of like integrated into that goal, is finishing up the books that I'm part of the way through. I want to have at least 1 book finished or in progress. So at some point in the month, working on 1 book each month, outside of my usual genres. So something like the nature books, dinosaur books, books on food, something that's, I guess, a little fun and a little bit not what I usually read. So I want to have at least 1 of those in progress at some point during the month. I also want to have at least 1 book finished or in progress each month from one of my topical TBRs. And I actually have started trying to actually like compile the lists of my topical TBRs, which the TBRs started as lists, and then like I bought books and thought, hey, they could be a part of this TBR or that TBR, and then never really like officially compiled them. But I have a journal that I'm doing that in, that's somewhere across the room. But I want to work on at least 1 book from one of the TBRs each month. I want to have at least 1 book or chunk finished from each class per month, which I already talked about. Those like DIY classes. I want to have at least 1 book finished for at least 2 of the year-long challenges that I'm choosing to focus on each month. And I think that this can include, like if I read 1 book, but if it for 2 challenges, that would work. Which, this is actually pretty similar to the Buzzwordathon goal that I had last year, except now it's actually in front of me to think about as a priority, and I'm able to like fill the stuff out about the readathons, which on Storygraph you can also do that and select the books, and I do really like doing that, but that's more like, oh, I get to check a cool thing. It feels nice, but it's not really a priority, and this is in a different spot, so I feel like it will feel different. We'll see. But maybe I can talk more about your yearly challenges this time next year. And then for journaling, I would like to journal and or quote extract for every physical nonfiction book that I read. I have several journals, Ooh, really, these even aren't all of them. But I started taking notes, in nonfiction books last year. This is, or no, the year before I started this. And it's been really good. I've kind of been doing it intermittently for different ones. And then I got this one specifically for the class books. And I'm in the middle of note extraction still for one that I read earlier this year. And for these, I am doing just like kind of general note taking, and adding in some quotes as well. So like a mix of notes and quotes. So each section of the book, I have a little bit on. And I'm trying to figure out how exactly I like to do it. If I like to do it as I read or after I read. I think as I read works well because I'm in the middle of, this is what a lesbian looks like note extraction. I feel like I've been doing it for 100 years. So I think doing it as I read is going to end up working more. And then I also have separately these books, which are just for quotes. And the way that I'm doing these, this is going to be an after the read sort of thing, because I do this regardless of whether or not the note taking occurs. This is for books that I read and I highlight or I make little notes. I then go back and revisit the highlights and I put the quotes in here. So this one is the one that I did for fiction. So as I'm doing this, I have a table of contents because I'll, in theory, go through the whole book. So if I want to just look at quotes that I like from the Honeys, I can do that. Or if I want to look at quotes about gender dysphoria, good descriptions of gender dysphoria, I can do that. So as I'm writing the quotes, I also think about what categories, and basically index as I'm going. So my goal is to journal and or quote extract for all of the physical nonfiction that I do. So even if I just do the highlighting, I can put the bits in this, or I can journal or take notes as I read. And in theory, all of the stuff that I journal, I can then more easily quote extract because I have the quotes in here, which this is good for reference for if I want to kind of revisit the book or some of the ideas. But this is good, like the quotes are good for, I think, more wanting to like reference certain topics and things like that. I think that'll be really helpful for like writing more and things like that. And it's just fun. So, and then I want to quote extract for at least one fiction book each month. Last year, I think you saw my table of contents. I've only done the quote extracting. I did 3 books last year. 1 poetry book and then 2 fiction books. The poetry I kind of put in here. That particular poetry book in particular was kind of written like a play, so it's fiction. We'll see how I choose to do the poetry this year. It probably depends. But I would like to try to do at least 1 fiction book per month with the quotes. And then I want to journal all class readings, which is already something I've been trying to do. And then I want to have, like I mentioned before, at least 1 full-fledged essay, including a rough draft, so rough draft, final draft, per month. And then do some sort of writing or journaling every day, which I think I've already skipped a day. But that's okay because we're still going. I'm also trying to read every day in January. I think Storygraph has a little thing for that. And in general, I would like to, this is not officially on here, but I would like to actually put what I am reading, like the pages that I'm reading, in Storygraph so that I can kind of accurately see how much I'm reading, because a lot of, I actually don't think that I went over which months I read most last year, because I got carried away talking about star ratings. And I think I'm gonna end up editing most of that out anyhow. But my 3 top months, I think, were January, March, and September for number of books. Page count was really January and March, but I think a big reason why January and March were my biggest page month counts was because that's when I was actually putting in Storygraph when I was reading. There are a lot of books that don't see the light of Storygraph, and I think that accurately recording what I read is going to be good. Same thing for accurately recording what I write, which will come up later in this. I think that it will help me feel more accomplished and help me get a better look at what I'm doing, because even just talking about how many books I finish, that doesn't really, I mean, it tells me a lot about what I'm reading, but it doesn't show the full picture, you know? So for reading challenges, the ones that I have in here, which there are more on Storygraph, and I'll probably, you know, think or consider some differently throughout the year, whatever. The ones that I have in my journal include Building Resistance, by Bisexual Bookshelf, and this one actually has specific books, and so I don't actually have the very first one. I don't actually have a full spread for, but it's the first one that I wrote because it was on a different list. However, it is one that I can at least think about and come back to more easily, I think, because I have a visual on it. So the ones I actually have full spreads for: Read What You Own, which I really need to be doing, reading what I own. Read Queer All Year, which I don't currently have a full spread for, but it's one that I'm going to be, you know, at the beginning of the month, I'm going to write down the prompts, and that is going to be one of the focuses. Because even though it's a, like, year-long initiative, the specific prompts come out at the beginning of each month. Queer Your Year, which is one that I have thought a lot about in terms of TBR, and I have potential things for. And they do have a full list that you can look at and do, but they also have quarterly bingo boards, and that's what I've chosen to put in here. I'm going to be going with that. And there's 25 translated books in 2025. The Disability Reading Challenge, and the Buzz Wordathon. So I have, this whole thing is not like, I'm not an artist, so it's not very aesthetically pleasing. I like to do cute little things here and there. But ultimately, most people's reading journals don't look like the cute flip-throughs. I don't have a really prominent Virgo to make it look that good, and I get, it's been a process for me to be okay with this. Like, one of the problems that I actually had with some of the journaly type things that I was doing before is that I would stress out when I would mess it up, and sometimes I would even like pull the page out and try to redo it, and it's like overly perfectionist, whatever. So it won't be the prettiest, but my plan is to have a good time. So Read What You Own. Those have monthly prompts, so there's 1 prompt per month. Same with the Buzz Wordathon, which is why this is towards the beginning, because these are more like 1 per month. The Disability Reading Challenge, I think when I saw the Instagram post for it, I wondered if it being numbered and there being 12 of them meant that they went with each month. But I wasn't really sure, so I didn't plug it in like that, and clearly didn't kind of like read it like that. But then I saw a new post today, and it does look like it's supposed to be like a prompt per month. So I don't know if I'm doing it right. But I think the point is to just read more books by disabled people or about disabled people, which I'm so far succeeding in doing. I've only read 1 book so far. But after that, 25 translated books. I also saw a similar initiative for Latinx books. And I think that would be cool too. I mean, there's really, since I've made this, I've seen so many yearly reading challenges, and I have to stop myself because I will think too far into it, plan and try to do a ton of stuff, and then do none of it. So I think translated books is a good one to focus on anyways, because that is one that I just haven't done a ton of. And I feel like I thought about this at some point because I read a really cool translated book in 2023, I want to say. And I'll put the picture here. And I still think about it sometimes. Like, it's really cool. And I haven't really looked at how many translated books I've read this year, but I know it's not very many. And typically the translated books I end up reading are manga, which is cool and good, but I would also like to read translated lit, because there's a lot of cool stuff out there. So at least 25 of them would be pretty cool. And that brings us to, first of all, the queer year bingo for the first quarter, but also my first quarter goals. And I'm kind of glad that they gave a format like this, because that also made me think about the fact that I could split stuff up into quarters and have like goals too, so I can continue to refer back to this page, and you know, I'll have the year goals and the quarter goals. So I'm going to talk about what those are. I want to read every day, at least a little. So if that looks like turning an audiobook on for a 15-minute break at work, or, you know, opening the book and reading a page, that is something similar to what I'm doing with the writing. I want to log when and how much I read each day, and write at least 2 days of the week outside of daily journaling. So have stuff like this. Oh, another big, I don't know exactly where it is, and I don't want to go searching for it, but I have a daily planner that's like, it's got a spread for each day, and I'm kind of using that as a journal. Like, I want to keep track of kind of what I'm doing, and it's not like a huge write a giant entry, but like literally put what I did each day, which makes me at least think and reflect a little bit. And that's like my bare minimum journaling in theory, is doing something like that. But I would like to write at least 2 days a week outside of that. So that's things like writing book reviews online, or doing the essays, or if I end up writing poetry or doing fiction or whatever. Log when and how much I've written each day, similar to the reading, and then have at least 2 videos per month. I think that's doable. I know at the beginning of last year I was like, oh, maybe I should do 2 wrap-ups a month. Not realistic. But I think 2 videos a month is doable. And now we can get into January. The way that I'm approaching this, I'm doing the spread at the beginning of each month. And in doing that, I can edit or tweak what I want to log, how I want to do it, and I can see what works for me. So rather than having a set thing that I do every single month, I can just kind of see what works. So this is what I'm trying out for January. So we have Read Queer all year. If I had any other January specific things that I was doing, I would put that on this page too. This to be read, I think I'm gonna set it up differently for other months, because for this one I wrote like what thing it's for, and then I put the book, and I don't think I want to do that. I think I'm gonna come up with something different, but this is what I had for this month. And then I put together some trackers to kind of see, these I think help me see what I read, but it also gives me incentive to read or write or what have you. I'm gonna show you this, but remember that I'm not an artist. You know, so I've got it kind of color coordinated. So days that I only read, I'll use more of a red color palette. Writing but not reading days, I'll have a blue color palette, purple for both, and then any days that I work on videos, I will outline in brown. So this is what we have so far for the year. And then I'm going to be outlining this 3 in brown a little bit later because I'm working on a video right now. So this gives me incentive because I can draw the cute little thing. I'm also seeing when I read most because this can help me like make a schedule or get a better idea of what I can do in a given day. I'm writing down like which days I do them, and I've got the same kind of color coordination happening. So I read on my break during the 1st and the 2nd of the month. I wrote after work on the 1st and read after work on the 2nd. And then this is today. I read and wrote in the afternoon, and I did not work today. And then I have this to give me an idea of what I'm actually doing. So I have not done, I need to do my personal journaling today because I didn't do it yesterday. And this is either doing like a full prompt or doing that planner thing that I was talking about, those lists. But I've done online posts and then other here. Oh, I didn't write yesterday. And you can see I have that. And I'm trying to figure out like what else I kind of work on because I have tarot here because when I do my tarot readings, I try to write kind of what it is. And I don't always do like a long reflection afterwards, which would definitely count as like journaling. But even without that, I think there's a certain amount of like reflection and things like that that go into how I interpret the cards for any given thing. So I'm counting it as a form of journaling. And then I have this to kind of record like what I write. I did have a bookshelf like drawn down here, but kind of decided to do away with that because I don't know if I want that sort of graphic or not. But I've written Instagram posts, even though I didn't write that much for my top list posts. I've done a book review. If I finish an essay, if I complete something, I'll have options for thinking about what little cute graphic I want to create for it. And then I have this, which looks weird all blank, but these are bookshelves. That's a little book. And then this is supposed to look like a newspaper eventually because this is for my articles and this is for my books. And then I'm also going to have like a little review, which is not the same. Like I have on Goodreads and Storygraph, in theory, will write reviews for a lot of this stuff. And what I wrote for this is not the same as what I put in the post because I don't always put all of my personal reflections in it. Just because I feel like it can kind of get out of hand a little bit, but so I'll have like the prompts that they work for, the rating if I rate it, and then kind of my reflections. And this is in pencil and not very pretty because the minute I try to make this look all cute and pretty and do it in pen, I will screw it up and then be upset or have like a bunch of scratches. And it's just better to do this part in pencil. So this goals video might be longer than I thought it was going to be because I ended up walking you totally through this, but that's fine. That's cool. So that is the idea of what I'd like to do in 2025. I'd like to be more intentional, I think, is the overall thing. I'd like to be intentional with the lists and projects that I have put together. I'd like to be more intentional about like knowing when I read and stuff like that. But I'm also giving myself leeway and I'm gonna kind of change things as they come along if I need to do that. And I would like to figure out kind of the best way that I end up working, figure out what works for me and what I like best in regards to all of this. So that is 2024-2025 reflections. In the comments, tell me about some of your 2025 goals that you're excited about or cool things about your 2024 reading. And thank you all so much for watching. Bye.